Hello, everyone. Thanks for watching this episode of Conversations on Conflict. For this episode, we have a very special guest. I'm joined by Merle Rockwell, who is one of the original founders of the Conflict Resolution Center in Montgomery County, as well as the very first executive director for our center. So in this conversation, we're going to be talking about, what kinds of challenges the center faced at the very beginning, why it was started in the first place, the types of cases that we were getting, and I'm really excited to have this conversation today. So Merle, if I just want to introduce you real quick. Thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited to be chatting with you on our 20th anniversary of being open
wonderful.
at the Conflict Resolution Center.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Happy to be here, and so proud of the organization and how far it's come since its rather humble beginnings 20 years ago. It was actually more than that. It was about 22 years ago when a group of people who were interested in finding better ways of dealing with some of the neighborhood issues that were going on in the area and so forth. See if we couldn't find, there were a couple of models that were already up and running for community mediation and conflict resolution. And so we started to gather a group of people who had some influence in that area. So some people were already doing mediation with NIH. I remember Odessa Shannon. She was the head of ADR at NIH at the time. Sig Paretsky, who was in the state's attorney's office. So we gathered together a group of people who were influencers and interested in finding better ways of managing conflict in our neighborhoods, is how I think probably that's the best way to describe how it all got started.
Oh yeah,
So
that's awesome. What was it? Was it hard finding that group of people? Where did it seem like there were a lot of people interested in that field at the time, or how have you seen that change over time as well?
Well, it was interesting when I came in at the second meeting that they had held. So when I walked in, there was already a table full of really wonderful people talking about this. Wendy Swire was there, and she's still on, I think she's still on the board, and she's become a good friend over the years. And of course, Pete Melanie and Richard Alper and so forth. So we were all at the table sitting together trying to figure out what would be the best way to do. So I felt that it was important that we go out and we talk to other centers. And rather than reinventing a wheel, let's figure out, what do we need to be careful about? What do we need to celebrate? What can we do? We decided as a group we would not be a part of any government agency, that we would be freestanding, if you will, and that we'd work toward becoming our own nonprofit when that was possible to do. So we did a lot of footwork before we actually jumped in and said, here we are, we're doing this now. And what happened as a result of that, I think, is that when we applied for our nonprofit status, it took 3 weeks to get it. We had everything all done. I was printing out brochures on my desktop computer. We were running it from my home at the time, and we did that for 3 years. And then we finally moved into the regional service center that's in Wheaton. But we were holding board meetings in Bethesda. It was kind of interesting. So that the nucleus of it started in Bethesda, and then we moved to a place that was serving a different population than perhaps Bethesda was at the time. So then we had to figure out, well, who's going to do this with us? Where are we going to find the mediators? What is it that we need to do? So we got a list of mediators who were registered with the state in one way or another, or affiliated with program, or lived in our area. We started, I have a photograph. I wish I could send it to you, because it's Richard and Peter and I sitting at my dining room table. And we are writing notes to people we've identified as trained mediators. We set out what it was we wanted them to have in terms of training, what was acceptable. And how many mediations had they done? What kind of mediations were they doing? Were they doing pro bono work, or were they charging for their services and so forth? So we kind of built it from the ground up, but it was a big collaborative effort, which fit perfectly with what our goals were, I think.
Yeah, no, that sounds very impressive. When you were describing the scene sitting at your dining room table, I was envisioning that classic photo of the folks at Apple starting in a garage. You know, they're
Yeah,
all
yeah, it was kind
very
of,
young and scruffy looking.
well,
So yeah.
we got another phone line in our house, and we decided that that would be both a fax line, but it would also be the CRCMC line. And by the way, the name CRCMC was a collaborative decision made by the people at the table. And when it came time for that first logo, which you're not using anymore, which is fine. I love what it is now. I think it's so clever and so colorful and so updated. But I went out online and I downloaded a whole bunch of free clip art stuff that looked like one of it would work. And I put them all on the paper and we passed it out, and I asked people to circle the one that they liked the best. And the one they liked the best were the hands holding each other, forming a support system for people of all colors and all nationalities and so forth. And that seemed to fit perfectly with what we were about, or what we wanted to be about. So that became our first logo. We never did any mediations, of course, at my house. We were identifying places all over the county that we would be able to do that. We didn't have.
Where were you doing mediations? Is that were you using like community centers, libraries, recreation?
All of the above, all of the above. In fact, I'll tell you a really funny story. Pete and I, when we first got started, we would meet at a McDonald's and we'd sit in the car together, and we had like a schedule when we were trying to create interest. For instance, if we were going to go talk to let's say any group of people, we had a kind of routine that we would go through. And so we would sit in the car and we would put a P next to one and an M next to another. And we would stagger, like he would do one, I would do another, he would do one, and I would do another, just so we could keep them off balance a little bit. And we always had, a handful of these homemade brochures that we did, and we would hand them out to everybody. And that's how we built it. I mean, it was interesting. I went back and I pulled out, again, I apologize for the noise. In year one, we started in July of 2001 legally, if you will. And we got our first money, $20,000 grant from Macro in October. And between June and when we started in October, we did 55 cases.
Wow.
55 cases.
That was going to be my follow-up question, is how many cases were we talking? That's impressive, right away.
And I worked with someone named Carla Mamana, and she, I don't mean work with her in terms of work, but she and I together designed the day of trial program for the district court in Montgomery
I had
County.
no idea. That's incredible.
Yeah. And what was really wonderful is that when they built the new courthouse, we had something to say about where the mediation office pieces were going to go. And at that time, we were doing everything in 2 languages. We were doing it in Spanish. We had started it in Spanish. We hired someone who Spanish was their native tongue. And so whenever we ran up again, she actually for a little while had an office in the new building when they built it in downtown Silver Spring. So we went from 55 cases in that first time to doing close to 600 of them by the end of 5 years. We started out with roughly, by the end of the second year, we had 41 mediators. And by the end of 2006, we had 121.
Oh my goodness. I had no idea you had such a team back then. That's incredible.
We did. We really did. And then later on, let's see. So the board were the first people that were a part of the whole thing. And then I became chair of that board. And then we officially started July 1, 2001. So I resigned from the board, became the executive director. And then we needed somebody to set mediations up and so forth. I couldn't do both of all of that.
Like an intake department, right? Yeah.
So yeah, we had an intake department, and that's where the second line in our house came in, because her job was to check on that line for anybody that called in. So that was the number that we were using. But the big mistake we made in the early part of it was putting my home address on the.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you don't do that.
That sounds like yeah. How many folks did you have showing up ready to try?
We only had one. We had
Oh.
one, but he was Russian, and I thought that was rather interesting, and a little bit on the, maybe we need to change that brochure and
Mhm.
take our address off of it. But it was somebody looking for some help, and we were able to, if I remember correctly, help him out. But so we, and then by July 2004, we were still in my home, had somebody in the house who would work a couple hours in my home through the summertime. I'm trying to remember when it was September 2004 when we finally got space in the Regional Service Center in Wheaton. And what I remember is by then that we had enough money so that we could buy some furniture. So we went to IKEA and we bought furniture, and all of the people that you've heard me mention sat out in the hallway putting furniture together so that we could have this office, and we were all in one office. So we had someone, Pete was there because he was doing some work. Our gal that spoke Spanish was there, and she was an intake person. We had several people doing that at different times. And it worked pretty well. We hired the Marcia Cartagena in February 2005. As I said, she was the person who spoke Spanish as her native tongue.
Mhm.
And it was very helpful when we were in Wheaton because of the big Spanish-speaking population there.
So when and you may have said it, I may have missed it. So how long were you just running this operation entirely out of your home?
3 years.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
3 years, yeah. And that's after the 2 years that we met before. I went back and looked at my records, and the first time I sat at the table with everybody in Bethesda was January 1999. So a full 2 years before, and then some before we actually became CRCMC.
Yeah, that's so crazy to think. I love that, you and your team were just so committed that, it took you the 2 years to then, make sure that when you did apply for the, nonprofit status, 3 weeks, you're in funding right away. That's, that is very impressive.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm curious as to what kind of cases you were seeing, at the very beginning and sort of how that evolved. What types of cases did you start to get over the first few years, and where most of your cases were actually coming from?
Well, I think part of it was that effort that Pete and I made in the beginning of going out and talking to different groups of people. Obviously, we wanted to spread the word that this was available, that it was at no charge, and we needed people to be referring to us. And so it was an informational piece that we did at the same time with an end result of hopefully they would come to us. In the early days, it was a lot of neighborhood types of things. We called them our dog poop cases, or the bad neighbor case.
Yeah, we're still doing dog poop cases. Yep.
You do that stuff. But then it evolved into doing common ownership communities where you have a set of rules that you can't break because, unless you're working with their particular board, but there might be ways of mitigating the anger around it or a repayment of anything that might be due or whatever. So we did that. And then we started working with young families that had children that they were dropping off at a particular care center, and how did they work more effectively with the parents, and how did they handle disputes and so forth. And then I mentioned Tom Dunn before. He was a really fascinating person and very, very helpful in the beginning. And we started teaching facilitation to our mediators because it looked as though we were going to be doing some community facilitating. One of the things that we did facilitate as a team in doing all of this was the Bethesda Triangle. When they were developing all of that, it was abutting neighborhoods where people lived and where their homes were. And there was all that tension that built up about how was this going to change their lives or depreciate their homes. And so we had learned from Tom, he taught several classes, how to facilitate community meetings of that sort when you have divergent interests and oftentimes clashing interests. They weren't always just different, they were clashing. So we did that. And then we worked with the police. We did roll calls. We'd bring them donuts. We'd stop at Dunkin' Donuts or something, and pick up a whole tray of donuts and bring it over at 7:30 in the morning and do the roll call. And then to make it easier for them to make referrals, we designed a little pocket card like this that told them what was appropriate to refer to us and the numbers, and they could pull it out of their pocket and give it to people instead of getting involved in things that really didn't require a police presence.
No, and that's funny you mentioned that. We actually just started doing that exact same outreach attempt again, where I went to a roll call meeting, and I guess as technology has advanced now, I was giving police officers a little QR code thing so that people can scan them and request a mediation right away on site from wherever the police officers are interacting with them. It's nice to see how things have transitioned but stayed the same in many ways.
Well, and they've grown too. I mean, all that technology wasn't present when we were doing it at the level it is now. And I'm afraid most of us hadn't grown up with it. You're probably a native with it all, which makes it a whole lot easier for you to be able to help other people do it, I would think. Yeah.
And just to think, 20 years ago, our organization was being ran out of somebody's house, and now we're doing virtual mediations with hundreds of people, and
I love it. I've been following it. I follow you out on Facebook, and I'm really so proud of everybody and how much it's come. It's interesting when you're a founder of a business of any kind, whatever it is, your heart is in it. And I remember one of the things that I fought against is it's not Merle's program. People would refer it because they attach a founder to the program itself. I didn't want it to be that way. I wanted it to be the program of the people, because that's sort of the persona that we were. That's who we are.
The true spirit of a community mediation center.
Yeah. And I'm proud that the center has become a model in the whole state of Maryland and beyond the borders of Maryland. I think people take a look at the program to see what you're doing, and I love it. I'm so proud of everybody.
Oh, well, thank you. That is definitely nice to hear on my part, and on behalf of all of us that are here now. That's very kind of you to say.
Well, I believe it. I do. I mean every word of it. It's just lovely. There were a few ruffles and flourishes after I left, as one might expect. And so I have this image of always, when you're trying something new or you're transitioning into something, of kind of building your wings on the way down, and just before it's going to fly up. And I think that's what you've done, and I love it. I'm so proud of everybody. It's wonderful. Doing good work. You're doing good work. You're still using my tagline, by the way.
Oh yeah, which one's that?
The piece by piece. That was that was my idea years and years ago.
I don't think we'll ever let go of that one. Well, and I'll start giving you credit for it now that I know that was you.
Oh, you don't have to do that. Don't worry about it. I don't own any of it. It really belongs to the people that keep it going. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Merle. I appreciate you coming on here, spending some time with me, chatting about the beginnings. It's really nice to, especially, mentioning again, it's, 20 years, 22 years, give or take, right, with how much work was put in before. But, it's great to know that we've come this far, and that it's thanks to folks like you who really helped out at the very beginning, making us what we are now. Is there anything else you want to say to anybody who's watching? Any last minute thoughts or anything that you wanted to share that we didn't get into yet?
Well, we covered a lot, and I thank you, Ben. It really was a treat to be able to talk about those early days. It's amazing when you think about it. how far
Mhm.
you've all have come. And I think just keep doing what you're doing and make it better all the time, and it's going to be fine. And I'll keep watching. I'll keep watching as long as I
Please do.
can.
I hope you do. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
will.
yeah.
I
All
will,
right.
Ben.
Well, thank you. Thank you again, Merle. And thank you everyone who tuned in to watch today, or maybe sometime in the future. Again, I just want to thank Merle for hopping on here and having this chat with me. And I just want to, on behalf of all of us at the Conflict Resolution Center, Montgomery County, we wouldn't be here where we are today without the help of all of our volunteers that have helped us along the way, all of the community members that have believed in us and supported us with either volunteer hours, donations, or just sharing the word about our services and the programs that we provide.
That's good.
So with
Perfect.
that,
Just the way it
with
should
that,
be.
I'll let you go.
All right.
Have
Thanks.
a wonderful rest of your night.
Thanks. Bye-bye.